to take a look at a very core essence, the principles of the i6estalt creative thinking strategy. All right, I can talk. The principles of this i6estalt creative thinking strategy you can think of like a hub. And as you view either the PDF or see the graphic that I have at the top of the page, you will see that it is made up of a number of different elements. Now, there's two pieces to this hub concept. One of them is the i6estalt creative thinking strategy itself is a hub to other thinking strategies. And what I mean by that is you've probably heard of different creative thinking strategies. You've listened to different gurus. You might have even designed in kind of your own approach to creative thinking. And what we have done here with the i6estalt creative thinking strategy is we have designed it as a hub which allows you to leverage and take advantage of all those other creative thinking strategies or approaches. And rather than trying to override them, trying to say this one's better than that one, that's not what this is. This is more of a way to connect all of them so that it further, because we're telling you the why, they're telling you ways to get at creative thinking. We're telling you why that works and giving you our own approach. So don't think of this as as it's superseding other creative thinking strategies. Rather, it becomes a hub. Now, for that hub concept, we put all these elements together, and there's 9 of them. That's what creates the i6estalt and the bang. That's a programming term for an exclamation point. And also you'll notice the word i6estalt has its own features to it. In fact, the logo itself has features that we'll talk about later. But the I got that from Apple, the iPhone, and the i this, the i that. And then on the other end, kind of parenthetically, is the I upside down. But I have to accomplish that on a keyboard with a bang, with an exclamation point. But it fits and works with the system. And then the gestalt, the G is kind of upside down, and it makes a 6. And that's because this all centers around the sixth sense. And that turns out to be the 6th arena in my 7 arenas of human experience, which you'll learn in future modules. So all of it ties together. And the reason for creating this imagery in the naming is so you can remember better and so that it kind of gets into your bones. It's like a language that after you spend time with it, it just naturally surfaces and gives you unconscious advantages that you really can't even hardly quantify. But you'll notice when you have the ability to have breakthroughs and when you apply this logic directly or even indirectly, that it has benefits. I've taught this to my children. I have a son that's in the Air Force Academy in his junior year at the time of this recording. He's becoming a mechanical engineer, probably going to end up being a pilot. And I can see where this concept, and he'll flat out tell you, Dad, I use the i6estalt approach in this area of application. He's working with AI and robotics and various engineering aspects. So it's really exciting to see, my protege, my son, but applying this at such a high level and to realize, and I only tell you that to just add to, there's that word again, my favorite, the efficacy of the approach, the reality that it truly does affect the way you think. So we have this i6estalt word, and each element of that word it's an acrostic. It represents a part of the system, and that's kind of what you're going to get out of this module as you read the PDF. And by the way, when you see the page, it's just a summary of what's going to be in the training. Then you've got me just yakking my head off. Then you've got a video link that will read you a transcript of the actual document, the actual PDF. And then you can also download and read the PDF on your own in the resource links. The PDF was created many, many, many years ago. and so it references websites that are no longer in on the web, and it references a company name that is no longer in existence and things like that. So pay no attention to the man behind the curtain when it comes to that. When you actually download the PDF, it's been stripped out of the other notations, such as what's on the screen or the videos that we're making. Um, that being said, I'm in my spice store that we've created around these ideas, and I have to keep my eyes out for potential customers walking in as people pull up. So I apologize if I divert my attention. So here we have the I is the intersection. The letters, the number 6, which is the letter G upside down for the gestalt, is the sixth sense. The E is for education. The S is for saturation. The T is for trust. The A is for artistic. The L is to live it, or for live it. And the second T is thinker, and the bang. And so we are going to talk about all of these. A gestalt is not a term I coined. You've probably heard it many times. It is the idea of a spark of creativity. It's that moment when it's that aha moment, right? When all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I get it. And all these pieces come together for you. And it could be, you're learning to play piano and you've been practicing scales and learning how to read music and understanding theory, and also getting your hands working together. All right, there goes our local fire alarm. Let's hope everything's all right. But that's how we know that the fire trucks are about to take off. And we have volunteer firemen here. So God bless them and God speed with their duties. May they be safe. The gestalt is just that moment where, whoo, that's a gestalt in your mind, right? The sirens go off, and all of a sudden you're like, I get it. You're playing piano, and where do you end up? You end up in that kind of zone. Golfers talk about being in the zone, and lots of other sports people talk about being in the zone. And I like to use golfing as an example because when you get in the zone, it's like you could do no wrong. But what happens a lot of times in a golf swing is that the golfer has power leaks, and the ball needs all the power centered on it out of the head of that golf club. And that comes from just the perfect swing at the perfect time in any particular context of the golf game. And though Robin Williams had a great way of describing golf, we all know that it's a mental game. It's a game that truly defines this idea of getting in the flow and being in that groove. And it's the sixth sense where all of that happens. And in our model of the 7 arenas of the human experience, it's the sixth arena that we explore and talk about, because this is where all of this innate wisdom lives. This is where all this knowledge, and this is where everything exists already. There's nothing new under the sun, Solomon said. And absolutely right. And so as we take a look at these different sections, you're going to start to realize they work together in a context, and they build a fabric and a framework by which to think, a way of thinking about ideas and solutions and maybe even inventions, if you will. So at the center of all this, and you're going to see a graphic that represents this idea, but at the center of all this is these rods of knowledge. What I realized is that as we are going through the process of thinking, we're building rods of knowledge. I call them rocks, ROKs. We're building these, and they're cone shaped. They're cone shaped because in order for a rod of knowledge to have a gestalt, it has to have a gestalt at a very fine point. The gestalts don't happen when there's a base of knowledge that's very rigid. It has to frame itself into a very, very connected point. If you take two wires and pop them together, at the right there, you get that spark, that gestalt. Kind of think of it that way. These rods of knowledge, these cones, they're at their base. They're very coarse and rigid and very much constructed of raw knowledge. As they taper off and get closer and closer to the top, where they're much more nuanced and sensitive, they become almost fibrous like hairs. In this imagery, these things don't exactly exist in physicality, but rather this is a metaphor for thinking about it. And so these rods of knowledge, they you build them up until they are nice and lean and thin and are able to move around. And when they move around, they connect with other rods of knowledge almost as if they're waving their tentacles. And eventually they come together. And where they come together is where they address the sixth sense, and they find the solution, they find the answer to what they're looking for. And you wonder why, a lot of times artists will have a moment of clarity around their art and not be able to get back to it. So they say, write it down the moment it happens. Say you're a songwriter and you're looking for, or you're an author and you're looking for prose. Songwriters are looking for lyrics and melodies. When those moments strike, it's because these very fragile rods of knowledge are floating about the ether. And then when they culminate and come together and they ignite an address, then all of a sudden, all that data flows through those rods of knowledge. And because they are in your unconscious mind and actually quantumly connected to your brainstem and your cerebellum and your nervous system, your body receives those signals, and suddenly you have what we call it the muse. We say the lady has spoken, and we capture whatever that one idea is. So the very fact that artists have to kind of wait or maybe put themselves in a mindset that allows those rods of knowledge to move freely, they have to be constantly aware and ready for those type of things to happen to them. I believe that if you master the i6estalt creative thinking strategy, you can put yourself into that mode, you can create that connection, and then you can exit that mode so that you have control over this creative process. That is a skill worth mastering. It is also a great way to keep you from losing your mind, as the muse tends to really captivate people's imaginations and maybe even haunt them. If nothing, you're always on the lookout for the muse's voice, which can be tiring. So, I also agree the muse is wonderful to have visit you because it's exciting, it's exhilarating, it's otherworldly, it's not tangible. And I would not want to rob you of that or take that away from you, and nor would this system, nor does it. But rather, it gives you the ability when in crunch time, you ever hear about a novelist writing a novel and the publishing company wants to know where the next six are coming from. Suddenly, it's no longer fun to write a novel. The same goes with cooking, writing music, etc. Once you're under the gun, it kind of takes it away. Well, the i6estalt creative thinking strategy will give you a bit of a handle on being able to hit those deadlines, get into that creative space, and then get out much more efficiently so that you can enjoy the arrival of the muse and the connection with the sixth sense as an artist and as one who's very much akin, if you will, to having a liberated mind in those moments. So these rods of knowledge are the core of the system. And what the i6estalt creative thinking strategy does is it gives you the power to build rods of knowledge and then to control how they come together and how they find an address in the sixth sense to exploit and utilize. So, that being said, the intersection is how all of these elements come together around the sixth sense in order to produce this gestalt. The six represents the sixth sense, therefore, it's at the center of our wheel here. And everything that you're doing to build these rods of knowledge so that you can then direct them to an address at the sixth sense. This is all everything that you're doing in this approach is so that you can control what is otherwise seemingly uncontrollable. By the way, when we get into the idea of persona-aware, we are going to boil all of this down to a fundamental frequency. In other words, we're going to boil it down to a color that is represented by a hexadecimal code. That color, and there are unlimited numbers of colors. The computers nowadays can generate millions upon millions of colors, and they're not even scratching the surface because of the variation between one gradient and another. That's probably imperceptible to the human eye, but can still be quantified. As well, I believe there's colors that when we mix that we've not seen, but again, their nuances are so indiscernible. They live in the neighborhood of colors that we do recognize. The only problem is the colors we do recognize, we've already labeled. And then these nuanced colors, which are in between them, have completely different labels, but we're not privy to them on a conscious level and in our society because we can't see the difference. And our spice blends do the same thing. They're like a face. A face tells a story. And those spice blends, the nuance between a spice blend made with 6 ingredients of a certain amount each and then changing an amount by half a gram can completely change the balance and the expression of that spice blend. Hence why we create spice blends around personas, because that gives us an unlimited palette by which to develop spices around. And now we have spice blends and flavors that eye hath not seen and ear hath not heard. People have not even experienced some of these flavors ever, like in all of humanity, because they've never had a spice blend that has been created after the essence of a persona. And so, just to kind of fast forward it a little bit. So, the idea of the sixth sense is the idea that there is a, a realm where all information, all knowledge, all emotion, all physical as well as immaterial objects and items and elements exist. Okay, it's called a number of different things. It's called when referencing Solomon's wisdom. It's called Solomon's records. It's called or Solomon's. I think they're Solomon's Temple. Might also be a thing that it gets called the Acacia Records. It's called the Sixth Sense. It's called that. It's called a few other ideas exist in Native American lore, or the monks may have a different way of approaching it, etc. Biblically, the Israelites used to have a breastplate of 12 stones, and inside there was the Thummim and Urim, and they were stones. And those stones literally was this I gestalt process, but it was captured in a talisman that was given to the priests, and the priests would tune themselves to those stones in order to allow God to speak to them and give them instruction, not in words, but more in direction. So we see this idea, and people still use talismans. I don't use talismans because I believe there's a fine line between the power of the ethereal realm, which we are all about and investigating, and believe it's a realm that we as humans were given to exercise and leverage. Um, we see it in Christ's day when he would leverage it to the extent of being able to heal and walk on water, and be able to feed people with limited resources, but feed the masses. These are all examples of the ethereal realm being connected and and utilized. But then there's that spiritual realm where extraterrestrial entities live. And it's a very fine line between them, but we stay within the ethereal where it's safe and where we are welcome, and where and everything we need is in there. I believe when you get outside of that into that extraterrestrial realm, then suddenly where you're at is in a provocative but deceptive realm of the same principles we're leveraging in this realm, but distorted and potentially dangerous. And so things like forgiveness and appreciation and thankfulness and kindness and humility and meekness, these all are part of the ethereal realm that we are within. And those are nurturing and good for us and healthy. And they strengthen the vitality of our framework and our human experience. And that's where we want to stay. So the sixth sense, though it seems supernatural, is very much embedded in our creation, but it's right past the subconscious. This, and you'll learn this when we talk about the seven arenas of human experience. You go from the conscious to the subconscious to the sixth sense, the sixth arena, and this area where all of this information is stored. And so that six in the middle is so valuable to the system, and you should investigate it. You should learn a little bit more about it. You should see how different cultures have appropriated it, and you should be aware of the outer and inner boundaries of it in order to be able to measure it. I just noticed my image at the top there. I had originally constructed these images 20 years ago using Paintbrush, I believe, the program. So to put this together, I had the AI recreate it, and for saturation, it forgot to add an S. And maybe it didn't forget it. Maybe it's hidden behind the six, as alluded to, with half the N gone in education. But anyhow, it's not that I don't know how to spell saturation. All right. And so now we get to the E, which is education. And rods of knowledge, it's pretty plain. The E stands for the fact that we have to create and build rods of knowledge. We have to educate ourselves in order for us to amass the raw material that rods of knowledge are made up of. And that raw material is facts and figures and knowledge. It could be scientific knowledge, it could be mathematical knowledge, it could be holistic knowledge, it could be religious knowledge, it could be knowledge about a trade, a knowledge about the earth itself, the elements. It could be a knowledge about engineering. It could be a knowledge about a product. It could be the knowledge of an agenda, or of a theme. It could be the knowledge of a story. Whatever it is that you are wanting to build rods of knowledge out of, it's the raw material. Education. You're going to have to educate yourself. Now we have a lot of tools that have come our way and are used by marketers and business people all the time to do this. And all I'm saying is, here's the system that they're actually deploying when they watch a video at 1.5 to 2 times its speed, where you learn to speed read so that you can absorb a lot of information quickly. There was a time where I didn't have the money to go to the bookstore and buy a bunch of books. And so I'd go to the bookstore or a library, and I would spend maybe an hour or two going through the bookstore, fully digesting volumes of books, book after book after book, until basically I got tired. It could be a dozen to 20 different books inside of an hour or two that I would read and absorb the essence. I mean, I was my own AI, kind of like upload a PDF and say, tell me what it's about. That's what I would do. And that really helped me get good at educating myself. And you're going to find in the next letter, S stands for saturation. These techniques, the ability to listen to a tape shows you how old I am, a podcast or some sort of audio book at twice speed or 1.5 times speed. That is powerful because it allows you to saturate yourself with education in a much faster way. Video is a great way to do it as well. And these rods of knowledge require you to take in a lot of education in a very short period of time. I equate it to, in my mind, they can now build buildings by shooting. It's almost like a 3D printer, but it uses concrete. I think of it that way. I think of the faster I can build an infrastructure of a rod of knowledge, with education, with facts, figures, and findings, the quicker I can build a rod of knowledge and get to my gestalt, get to where the base is big, and then as I build, it runs up to the fringes. And once I get so much knowledge in me about a particular subject, it's starting to live through me. It's starting to come alive. It's starting to ignite. Those are the fibrous ends of those rods of knowledge starting to move around the ether so that they can connect with an address and connect with each other and create new rods of knowledge. So that's something else to be aware of, is when a rod of knowledge builds, establishes itself, and then it connects in an address, it kind of becomes a new platform. It becomes a new seed in your mind and in your construct for a new rod of knowledge to build upon. It's the shoulders upon which giants stand, right? Or the giant's shoulders upon which we stand, however you want to look at it. But it becomes a new node for new rods of knowledge to come about, so that they can address areas that a single rod of knowledge would not have been able to grow up to get to. But that's a little bit further down the line. When you saturate, you are pouring as much concrete into that structure. You're putting as much plastic in that 3D printed object as you can, as fast as you can. And the techniques for doing this vary, but for a lot of people, self included, I had to come to this realization: I don't sleep well, as you might tell. And I tend to wake up in the middle of the night for 2, 3, 4 hours. Well, it was early on in my 20s. Now, it was as a child I did it, and I'd get up and play basketball or play with my toys, or play. I had a Nerf ball in my room basket. I'd play for 2, 3, 4 hours, as quietly as I could, not to wake everybody. And then I'd go back to sleep. As I got into my 20s, I realized that was my most creative time. So I would wake up and I would research and document and kind of follow this path that I've been on. If I had actual work to do for my job or whatever, I would work on it then. I would work with such clarity, such speed, such efficiency, nobody bothering me, helped out a lot. And I would then be able to check off task after task in such a short period of time. You're going to find that you have peak times that you can saturate your mind, and your mind can handle it, and your mind regurgitates it, the things that it needs, and all of your faculties come together. And before you know it, you're building rods of knowledge at lightning speed. And quite often, this is why people have very powerful insights at various times in their lives, because they are applying themselves in this manner in a very focused way. So what I encourage you to do is find your pattern, figure out exactly who you are and how you operate, and allow yourself to be free in that time, to learn, to saturate yourself with education and with information. The other aspects to this are how when it comes to saturation, how you take in that knowledge. And I mentioned 1.5 times speed through the audio, being able to speed read through the eyes, but there's also experiences, travel, putting yourself in various stories and other people's experiences, meeting new people, touching things, getting a sense, why do people kiss the Blarney Stone in Ireland? I don't think that many people are truly superstitious that kissing a rock has a real magical element, but it definitely has a powerful positioning in your mind. Like a rod of knowledge suddenly has you kissing a stone. And from what I understand, you have to kind of get in a prostate position to kiss the Blarney Stone. Never done it, never been there myself, but I think Ireland would be an amazing place to go visit. But you're geographically located on the map at a very known place, and you're pressing your lips against, which are soft and supple, against something that's rigid and firm and has been there for thousands of years. And there's just this revolutionary contrast that takes place when you kiss the Blarney Stone that I believe impacts your unconscious mind in this arena, in this way. And it creates a jolt. Well, this is powerful to understand in this process as you're going about educating yourself. If you wanted to learn to play guitar, sure, there's courses you can take and books, but to be able to get yourself as close to another guitar player as possible, to maybe get literally hit in the head by a guitar at some point. Not that I would recommend you do this intentionally, but if it happened, or if maybe you go out and spend lots of money on a guitar and day one it gets run over by a vehicle and crushed under a truck's tire, you have been impacted. Don't look at that as something, as a loss. Look at that as, wow, now I've endured this great loss. How can that impact my education process, my saturation process? How, and don't spend too long thinking about it. I'm just telling you to get over it and realize it will, and it does. Even though it's a negative connotation, it impacts that rod of knowledge, and you can build upon that. And maybe that result of you spending all your money on that great guitar that got smashed by a truck forces you to go buy a $25 guitar at a garage sale that is incredibly hard to fret and incredibly hard to get a good tone out of. But the result of that design develops in you a sound that nobody else has, and it becomes the catalyst to your great success. And maybe it's what tunes your ear to a sound and a song that nobody else would have ever heard, and then you bring that to the world. So the idea of saturation is so much fun because you can people watch, you can observe the world from so many different ways, and you can use all five senses to touch the world and to hear the world, to taste the world. More than once I've been found tasting something that most people would otherwise not do. I remember, not a taste story, but another story. I remember when my children were very small, 2 and 3 years old. As their fingers developed, I would always get a really close look at their fingernails and this portion of their hand. And I would put my eye up against it and I would read it and I would take it in and I would think about it, because the fingernails are, they're this area, the cuticle, it's very soft, very tender, very specific to a personality. And I learned everything I needed to know about my kids in those moments of looking at their fingernails. And I waited till they were 2 or 3 so that they'd have some development behind their hands, but I also would know them. And by the time I took that time and made that connection, I knew I had the enough of a rod of knowledge about them that would reinforce what I was reading and gaining from that perspective. And my kids will never know I did this, they'll unless I told them, and I tell them stupid stuff, so maybe they've heard me say it. But they probably don't fully understand how that impacted me, how innately, and how sorry, that's a word I'm overusing. Let's say intimately, how intimately I got to know them in those moments. And I did that because I knew that I couldn't, like, I could learn more by looking at their fingernails for 4 minutes than I could by engaging them for the rest of their lives, especially since they change and bring, other people into their lives, which affects who they are, etc. But I had a moment at their very earliest stages where I connected to them and they with me, and there was nothing to infringe upon it. And I own that moment. And every now and then, when I'm around them, maybe at Christmas, when nostalgia sets in, I catch a glimpse of their fingers and their fingernails. By the way, they don't change unless they've dismembered themselves. They don't change. That resonance it becomes a baseline, and it personifies who they are in that moment at that stage of their life against this baseline. That kind of saturation can happen across the board in anything that you want to become good at. I've worked with electronics enough and computers enough that I know what they smell like. I've stuck my face into an open computer and sniffed exact, like an old book has a very particular scent. Sometimes computers have a similar scent because they collect dust, but you let your senses bring in from all points the knowledge and the education and the information, and you saturate from every perspective, not just with volume, but from angle after angle, so that this is like learning a language. They tell you can't really know a language till you go live and saturate yourself in a country around that language, picking up on all the nuances, the body language, the gesturing, the tonality, and also the ecosystem that you're living in as you learn that language. Whether it's a hot sunny afternoon by a coastal region in France, as you learn French amongst the grapevines of a vineyard, or whether, and I'm just making stuff up, or whether you're trying to learn a language in a very cold and tundra type of environment. Icelandic sort of slang comes with that ecosystem enveloping you. And so saturation is a joy. It's fun. It's a game that you can play, but you'll also realize just how powerful it is. They say you're as wealthy as the 5 people closest to you. This is because of this very principle. You want to be wealthy, you need to imitate wealth. And so you get around the wealthy and you start to pick up with all your senses, and don't lick them and be careful how you touch them. But going and getting a handshake from a powerful person can be more beneficial to your evolution as an entrepreneur or whatever it is you're chasing than anything under the sun. That is because when you touch the hem of the garment of the one who embodies that which you are so desiring of, virtue flows out of them into you. Literally, that their talent. And that's why people want to touch, Michael Jordan. They want to get around high levels of talent, right? Because they believe, and it's true, that energy will flow into them. It may not make them a Michael Jordan, but I guarantee you virtue is flowing out of him and into them with that moment. So you've got a funnel as people get closer to you. The day somebody touches you, is the day that they ought to be paying the most to be in your presence if you are an expert at something, because saturation is key. And as you saturate and get better at it, you build rods of knowledge faster so that you can achieve a gestalt and find in the sixth sense, find that address you're looking for. By the way, you cannot directly direct your rods of knowledge at uh, an address. What you can do is build the rods of knowledge and aim for a goal, aim for a specific theme within the, the sixth sense, and your rods of knowledge will find the proper address for you. It's a bit of a handoff, but go back to Einstein and him holding that mug, staying in that kind of trance area, that zone, so that the freedom for those rods of knowledge to dictate where they will connect is relinquished, yet the central nervous system stays intact so that he can uh, draw those ideas into his conscious mind and ultimately materialize them on paper. Nowadays, we have a lot of other devices that we can use, recording, audio, video, etc. We can even 3D print an idea if it comes to us, and hold on to it for posterity and for reflection. So, saturation is at the core of how we tangibly go about building rods of knowledge so that they can connect to the ether. It's how we take control, if you will, of this process in order to make it happen. Now, we get to T, trust. You almost need to put T prior to education and saturation, because it's the reason you're educating yourself with the saturation method, because you trust that the sixth sense exists, and the sixth arena, the acacia records, you trust that this pool of innate wisdom is there, and that these rods of knowledge truly will not just be floating around in the ether with nowhere to land, but that there is the ability to accomplish and to get at that information. You trust that you cannot create, if you will, anything, because you can't manifest anything from nothing. That is the role of the creator. What we can do is we can discover, and you have to make this mindset shift into discovery and trusting that the ideas are out there, trusting that the success element is out there, the new invention that you're thinking of is out there. When you make this shift and you stop trying to create it and you just suddenly let it come to you, you've heard that uh, the light bulb, the guy that made, not Einstein, I got his name in my head, but the guy that invented the light bulb. Yeah, I'm on one of these trains of thought that doesn't allow me to reach back into regular thinking. I'll remember his name. You probably already said it 10 times yourself, but he didn't invent that light bulb. Well, he tried 10,000 times. I believe he tried 10,000 times to create. Where'd you go? It appears that, oh, I guess I'm still working. My camera went off. You probably saw it. I have to really assume we're still recording. I assume we're still recording. I have no way to quantify that, or do I? Oh, I do, and we are still recording. Okay, my camera just went to the other. I think you saw it. Anyhow, uh, I failed to remember the guy's name, and my camera it just rejected me. It doesn't love me anymore. It said, you can't remember the name of the guy who invented the light bulb. You don't deserve to be talking. he 10,000 times tried to invent that light bulb, and somewhere along the line, he had saturated his mind so much with possibilities of making the tungsten light bulb work that I believe the ideas just came to him after that. And he probably assembled it going, wow, here, look, it works. I mean, all the time, the scientific method requires that we make conjectures, right, and then test them. And then once they are quantified, we accept them, and then we label them, and then we go and observe them and prove them to be accurate. Why? Because we're doing this again in that same process. We're allowing the ideas to come to us, but to get us in a position to have those ideas come to us and rapidly and and connected to our timeline and our agenda and the context of a contract or a demand upon our productivity and our output, we utilize this system to get us there. And so you've got to trust that those ideas exist. They already exist. And you also have to trust that you don't know how that idea exists. You don't know necessarily what the final solution is going to be. You're going to pivot. You're going to have an initial approach and then realize, oh no, it looks more like this. And, depending on what you're doing, that could be more or less volatile and happen more or less often. Some things might be a little more rigid. You're going to build a building. You got a good idea what buildings look like. You're not going to suddenly end up with something completely outside of the realm of what a building looks like. You get what I'm saying? Maybe you will, but ideally, you have to be able to recognize that the concept is out there. When I started creating persona blends, I had a vision and a visual that I could have a spice blend which would resonate on an innate level, on an unconscious level with me through my tastings, that I could consciously subdivide and articulate and appreciate and associate with. But I also knew that the essence of that theme it was built around would ultimately influence me. And I moved in that direction, not knowing what it would look like. And then what happened is more and more opportunities to apply our process to different themes, such as people, artwork, cities and towns, songs, bands, subjects. I have a blend that's built around karaoke, but I also have a blend that's built around the song Puff the Magic Dragon. I have another blend built around a band. These are all of the same genre of music, if you will, but the blends are entirely different. I had this perception and I moved in that direction and I built my rods of knowledge. And then as they started to connect with the ether and I started getting awareness of exactly what this was going to materialize like, it made it so much easier to make those decisions and to actually put the blends on the shelf, because I knew where we were going with it, and consciously I was able to kind of guide myself more distinctly in a direction that made the process easier. So you got to trust, and you trust by challenging, by setting goals, visual and mental, as well as practical and decisive, writing them down, etc. But you got to move in a direction, believing that you're not creating something, but rather you're discovering it. And once you get into that passive mode and that mindset of discovery, trust me, these things come to you. And when they do, you recognize that the gate has been opened, and it makes you much more um, aware, and it makes you really a craftsman of the idea. You know what to do with it now, what to write down, how far to take it in its first strides to get it into a concrete manner. All my books, this book I put on the web 20 years ago, because when these ideas came to me, I realized I had to capture them. And I wrote the book Kinetic Avatars, the 8 characters in your marketing message, which became the groundwork for 40 Story. I mean, over and over and over, I got better and better at capturing and 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 documenting the ideas, and then I built upon them, realizing they were all connected, realizing I was on a larger path to a very specific place that I still don't know what that place is. But at this point in this training, I am calling it Web 4. I've literally created an end-to-end um, uh, 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 doctrine for Web 4. And it's hard to believe, but maybe you'll start to get it as we move forward. All right. So I trust that this exists, the scaffolding exists, and therefore all my rods of knowledge are leaning in that direction. Then we get to the A, artistic. And artistic is a powerful element, because you have to realize that when you are creating, when you're using creative thinking and you're working towards this creative approach, you have to realize that you are being an artist. You are acting as an artist. You are leveraging artistic principles and design elements, whether you're aware of them or not. And you yourself have to be an artist at the process, and that means working on your craft, work on the craft of saturation and education, and work on the knowledge base of the sixth sense and how it works and operates and what it looks like and other evidences. Get yourself to absolutely trust the process, trust the result, trust the entirety of the muse when it arises and arrives with an idea. As an artist, you need to know your tools, your paintbrushes, your palette, your gesso that you put on the canvas. You've got to know how different paints act and react and dry and don't dry, and you've got to know all these elements consciously and then also in your bones. You've got to have a level of training and exercising of this system and of the creative process to make it second nature and an extension of who you are. So to become an artist and to artistically apply it and to be able to interpret your motives through art. When somebody looks at a painting, the question is, what is it? How does it speak to you? Too many people try to dissect the painting and what's physically on the canvas rather than letting it speak to them and reflect who they are. Maybe they're afraid of that. It very much is a disturbing emotion when your story, your inner persona begins to express itself, because you've spent so much time building up a false front that when that inner persona starts to speak with clarity, it's quite disturbing, and it's jarring is a better word for it. Let it run your life, it might become disturbing. But as an artist, you're looking for that voice. God says that He speaks in a still small voice. We're lending ourselves to this still small voice. If you want to hear from God, you've got to be still and know that He is God. And the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom in a connection with God, right? Well, if you're doing that and applying that same principle to the creative thinking process, you're yielding to that process and to that end result in such a way that it's without being sacrilegious, because we're not saying these are gods, but maybe they are with a little g, maybe they are small idols, but you're lending yourself to that idea. You want to fix your car and you don't want to mess it up because you only got one chance to do, I remember the first time I pulled the rack and pinion out of my Volkswagen Scirocco. Yeah, again, showing my age. And I'd never done such a thing in my life, but my back was against the wall. I had to have my car. It had gone out and I didn't have the money to pay a mechanic. And so I from A to Z, I figured out what product parts I needed and bought them and pulled that thing apart. And as I did, I learned, and I was truly compelled by the process that I went through, because I approached it like an artist. I was reaching into the unknown, but I was watching it come together right before my eyes, and I got it back together, and it worked great. But that is, I'm not a mechanic. I'm not mechanically inclined. I've got more stories to tell you about how I messed up in that realm. But something compelled me to give myself over to the project in a way that I didn't get in the way. And the result was positive. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about this artistic approach. And then L is live it, and not livid, but live it, although it might make you livid. You've got to live this. You've got to live the thing that you're doing. If you want to be successful, dress for success, they say. Well, maybe there's something to that. Maybe if you want to be successful, you have to put yourself in a mode and in a frame of mind of successful people. You have to act and react a certain way. You have to walk, talk, skip, and dance to the tune of success. Otherwise, success will evade you. Define it as you will, but you have to live these principles. You have to purposely listen to audiobooks and read and consume knowledge and maintain a very straight and narrow approach to what you learn if you want to build a very specific rod of knowledge in a very short time and create efficiency in doing so, so that you can build a rod of knowledge that accesses the result, and let the pressures around you be what confines you to that strategy and that awareness. You ever come up against a deadline and it be the best work you ever did? This is why. This is the why behind putting deadlines in your life and giving yourself a time limit on things. This is why it works, and it's because it's part of this process. So you have to live it. And then you get to the last T, which is the thinker. The thinker. You can't take your conscious mind out of the process. You have to allow yourself to think through what's actually happening, because understanding of your own mind is a very important gateway to mastering it. You should understand how the brain is set up, how you have a frontal lobe that I say acts as a big antenna, and it's bringing in, and all the senses are divided amongst it, and it's consciously, it's got the gears that are working to distribute all the signals. And you got your amygdala, which is that emotional center, and you've got your brain stem and your cerebellum, and you've got all these pieces of the actual mind that are working in cohesion to take that creative thought and do something with it. And if you don't fully understand it, then you're losing out. So dive into how your mind works, dive into how the conscious and the subconscious interact. When you go to bed at night, you're writing into the subconscious mind, and your conscious mind is doing a data dump. And learn what happens when you sleep. When you sleep, you're literally defogging your brain. You're burning off all the residual and all of the carbon, if you will, that built up around your mind during the day, because you're literally processing and you're literally burning up brain cells, and they're being discarded. And so the process of sleep, it's amazing, but it's literally taking and removing that so that you can think through things the next day. Power naps work because they burn off a lot of that in a very short period of time. 10-15 minutes can give you a new sense of clarity from 3 o'clock to the end of the day, if you have a power nap at the right time, because now that membrane, which might have gotten very thick with soot, if you will, gets cleared up, and you can see a little bit better. Your brain can work a little bit better. It's not as heavily laden. But you sleep for 2 hours, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm more foggy than when I started. And that's because you go into that REM sleep, and now it's your muscles and the frame of your body, your joints and everything else that are starting to repair themselves, then that's a much, much more intensive sleep. Anyhow, that's a complete sidetrack that we're going down a rabbit hole. But learn how your emotions and your logic and your memory all weave together, and learn how your autonomic nervous system reacts, and understand that you have a number of different nervous systems in your body that each play a different role. It is imperative if you truly want to master this idea of being able to find solutions to problems of great magnitude. It's imperative that you understand how these systems all work, and what'll happen is you'll recognize patterns within them that you can then direct into a purpose. See people take ice baths, and I'm running out of the ability to speak here, and you're probably happy, but we're getting very close to the end of this module, so, and as time would have it, I've got to get going. But instead of being driven by these patterns, you're able to put these patterns into order. And by ordering them, literally putting them in order, you're ordering them, and you're able then to move in a direction that is incredibly powerful for your intended purpose. And I promise you, the beginning of this, first you just have to sit and listen to all this. You have to kind of go, all right, this is an interesting infrastructure. I assure you, whether I'm explaining it well or not, it works. It is the infrastructure for creative thinking. It is what's happening and the bottom line is, when you do creative thinking, you're literally reaching into the sixth sense and pulling back. I'm giving you a breakdown of how to use this imagery and these frameworks of rods of knowledge, and then the approach to building them, so that you have a functional tool belt by which to go after the creative thinking process. But you could throw all that out the window and say, I'm just going to put myself in a trance. I'm going to use, I'm going to use narcotics of some sort to alter my mind, which probably works, and it might work for you very well. But at the end of the day, your entire human experience is going through these steps in order to accomplish that. And if you do it this way, then obviously you don't have the byproducts that narcotics or alcohol or some other substance might bring into your life. Plus, you can control it and not end up in that extraterrestrial realm where black magic and things of that nature might cause harm and bring harm to you and your family. And the last one is that big bang, that explosion at the end, that exclamation point. It's that instant that you take control of the process. It's the energy and the mastery behind creativity. And it's not random inspiration anymore, as we discussed at the beginning of this, but rather it's predictable results. This is what you want to get at. And notice the beginning is the I. It's the intersection. You're at the core of that intersection. At the end, it's the bang. It's the gestalt. Everything in the middle is just a transition between you and the idea coming together. I gestalt, creative thinking strategy. You put it all together, these 9 principles, and you will form a living framework. I promise you, a system that will grow with you and adapt like a hub to other systems and other ideas and other corporate demands that come into your life. Each one will amplify the other, and when they synchronize, the result is powerful, predictable, and creative. You're not waiting for ideas anymore. Rather, you're building the structure that makes them inevitable. So forgive me, I use my notes to kind of close this out, but there it is. That is, in a nutshell, the principles behind the i6estalt creative thinking strategy. I implore you to watch the other video and or to download the PDF and read through, so that you get the exact words that I used when I initially designed this system, so that it can impact you in a way that 20, 30, ever how many years have gone by, might have taken the edge off of them. Read those and get these principles in. Get that I gestalt in you. Write it down, write it out, create the acrostic, print the wheel, do whatever. Let me know if you could utilize, if I could develop a tool that helps you with this, if I could develop an app, build a web page, make a new video, whatever the case may be. Tell me how I can help you. Get these principles dialed in, and I'll be there for you. All right, it's the I Gestalt creative thinking strategy. That's the principles. Now let's go on to the process. Ding! Makes me think of that song. Sing a song of sixpence, pocket full of rye, 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie. When the pie was open, the birds began to sing. What a dainty dish to set before the king. Okay, nursery rhyme, whatever. Bye-bye.